This is Will McKenzie speaking. I am going to be running the meeting this evening since our chairperson, Marcia, is attending via Zoom. So I'd like to call this meeting to order and invite everyone to rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, as always, we're going to start our session with an opportunity for public comments, and anyone who wishes to make public comments can raise their hand. Or there are other methods which are available if you go to the school's website under school board agendas. There's other information regarding other ways to make comments. Nick, I don't see any hands raised. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything.
Okay, there will be another opportunity for public comments at the end of our meeting. So with that, I'm going to move forward to the superintendent's report. Ruben?
Great, thank you. So first of all, I just want to congratulate the athletic teams that competed this past weekend. Over, I believe it was in Dairyfield Park over in the Manchester area. So we had our soccer team, our boys soccer team was in the playoffs, and I think they got further than where they had been before. They played a very difficult team, Trinity team, and they did fall short, but not without having a great fight. And so in talking with one of the players today, he was saying, yes, we lost 2-0, I believe it was, but they felt that they really had a good showing. Also, that same day, on Saturday, the boys cross country and the girls cross country competed. Boys came in third, the girls came in around 6 or 7. The boys will next, as a result of coming in the top 3, they'll be competing this coming weekend in the Meet of Champions, over at Nashua. The last night, as anyone who is listening in right now or viewing in right now, you would have received either an all call or emails or both, just talking about the heating situation over at Ridge Memorial School. Yesterday, I got a call around 2 o'clock or so, 2:30, that there was a gas leak over that area and that we needed to have some individuals go over there and meet with the fire department. And in doing so, we got also the company who provides services for our boilers to go over there and found out that there was a valve that was broken, and I think there was another piece as well, a regulator, I guess is what it was just called, and that those pieces they didn't have those in stock, and that they had to travel to the seacoast in order to get that, which is why they had to do that this morning in order to make that happen. Everything has been repaired, the heat is on, so everything should be in good order. And we have checked in on that. We'll continue to check in on that tomorrow as well. And then we have many things going on from the standpoint of planning and preparation. So we may talk later on tonight about school board goals and making sure we have some tight plans from academics and facilities and technology and so forth, and we've alluded to that through several of our meetings. One of the items that we're doing right now is we are in the middle, we're actually literally in the middle of an audit from the Adam Group. They're off the seacoast from New Hampshire. The Adam Group has done a penetration test. What that means is they've tried to come in at a certain time of day and hack into our system to see how strong our firewalls are and to see how protected our infrastructure is. And so they're finding that we have a lot of very good elements to our system, and they've also been jotting down quite a few recommendations that they're going to have. And this is really valuable information for us, because as we go and plan for technology over the next several years, yes, certainly we want to make sure that we're utilizing technology to improve our educational system and to use it in a way that is going to help students think more critically and at a higher level. But we also need to make sure that we are, our infrastructure is, and our policies and our practices are really the best that we possibly can have, and to make sure that we are also not exposed to threats for, especially for data that we don't want other people to have. So student data, things that would be within our servers and so forth. So that will continue on through December. At December, we'll have enough information to really put that plan, the best draft of a plan together, bring that to the board in the winter time in 2021. Not the December winter time of 2021, but the January, February timeframe, early on this school year. The COVID-19, I sent some communication out, just some of which was just to let people know where we stand. Certainly we've had conversations about making certain that our school model continues to go as is, as long as we possibly can. We do have a decision-making matrix that would determine or help us determine whether to or when to go to remote learning and when to stay in person. Right now it's pointing to in person. The area, Cheshire County, is in the green. It is the last county right now that is in the green, or minimal transmission. It's about 50-50 on the others as to whether they're in the red or the highest level, or they're in yellow. We are approaching the yellow mark though. We're about 46, 47 cases, positive cases per 100,000. And so when we hit that 50 mark, that will put us into the yellow. Specifically Jaffrey and Ringe, if you've looked at the charts over the weekend, Friday and over the weekend, Jaffrey and Ringe numbers have increased this past week. And so if we all continue to do our part to keep our hands clean, to wear our masks, to stay socially distanced and so forth in as many environments as possible, I think that we can curtail any problem that we are likely to have. But we want to just be aware that those numbers are indeed climbing. HVAC, we talked a little bit about the HVAC or the heating issue over at RMS, but through this time of COVID-19, we've done a lot of things to improve the air systems within our school. And we've had a couple engineering firms come in and talk to us about our preparedness and so forth. I'm pleased to say that the last group that came in looked at some of the early data that the first engineering group had provided, but also did some spot testing in different locations, and indicated that in this group is a large engineering firm and has worked with several schools, that we have exceeded the current standards for maintaining a safe and healthy environment for occupants in our school district. So I'm pleased to say that. We continue to want to make sure that we're following our guidance, our guidelines, changing that guidance whenever the guidance changes to be best practice. And along with that concept of COVID-19 and preparing, we have talked, I guess, months ago now about the excuse me, CARES Act funds that we received from the federal government, or well, the Department of Education put toward us, and that was about $275,000, a little bit less than that. That money is pretty much all used up, and certainly will be budgeted for completely by the end of this week. After that money is completely budgeted for, the New Hampshire Department of Education, around the 11th or 12th, is going to be providing our district with another $270,000. That's based upon our last year's average daily membership times $200, so $200 per pupil. And so Jaffrey Ringe gets $270,000 specifically to pay for COVID-related expenses, which we certainly have that. We have certainly spent that, but expenses like even paying for more cleaning services, additional nursing services, anything of that nature to make sure that our model was able to work and we were able to provide the supports for our learners and the adults in our area as well. So that money, there's a little bit of a, I don't know, you call it a wall to that, in that that money has to be all accounted for by December 30th. So everything has to be spent by that time frame. So if we're talking salaries and benefits for anyone, it can only be salaries and benefits up through December 30th of this year, because that money no longer is.
So it has to be, it's a cash basis.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have to give the Department of, we have to be able to, we don't have to write a grant for this. They give us the check basically, and then we have to have everything accounted for so that they see that when they basically do an audit of us in the early spring or late winter this school year. And that's, it's a lot of technical information, but I think it's important to keep you apprised of that. And I know that we'll continue to internally work on developing budgets. I believe Carrie's going to be sending out an invite to the Finance Committee for its first meeting.
We have it.
Oh, good. Hopefully next week, and then we'll get some subsequent ones right after that with different parties, different groups who are working on the budget to get going on that. And I believe at the end of the week of this week, we should have the default budget numbers all situated, which is really we've found to be foundational to all of our budgeting. Any questions or thoughts? Yes, John, if that's okay to, Laurel, I can call on John. Okay.
So Ruben, it sounds like in total we will have received almost 500,000 from the state.
Yeah, about five and a quarter, I think, or $550,000, a little bit less than that, 545,000. We can actually, if we do have all of our money accounted, like all of our expenses accounted for by, say, December 1st, which I do believe that that's very likely to be the case, to have all of our CARES Act funds budgeted for, to make sure that that $70,000 is in a sense used by December 1st, and that can be past expenses, since the beginning of the year. We can then apply for another batch, which is good for basically the rest of that month. It will turn around pretty quickly. There's another 10 million. Basically, the governor provided $45 million of funding to New Hampshire public school, well, actually not just public schools, but New Hampshire schools. And so 35 million of that this is part of 35 million, the 270,000 is. And so there's another 10 million that is there that you have to apply for. But you can only apply for that if you need it, right? So you have to show need and show that you've used the other funds.
So I presume you're limited to July 1st, is that right? From July 1st on? You can't go back to last April or May?
Technically, you can. It depends. We really can't without changing a lot of our documents that we've done, the MS-25 and all that sort of stuff. So we would only look back to July 1.
Okay.
And that's really where we incurred most of our expenses anyway.
Okay. It sounds like you've got a strategy though to use even these 270,000 new monies.
I'll give you an example. So we're paying for an extra cleaning service to support us while we're hiring some other custodians. So the cleaning service would fall into that. We have a nurse that comes in 4 days a week and we pay for that. So that would, up to December, that money, all that can be paid for through that. If we hired long-term substitutes to make sure our class sizes were a certain spot, or to make sure that we had coverage if someone was ill, up till their salaries until December 30th could be counted into that. If we hire additional custodians, that salary up to that point.
Energy costs.
Energy costs are tougher. We talked about that. That's a tougher one to be able to show right away within that time frame. But it is, yes, if you could prorate anything that has to do with COVID related expenses to that time frame, it would count. Technology, of course, hotspots, which we've been using and we're going to need to get more of.
Especially when you refer to that additional 10 million, that's, it's great to know that you've got a plan to use this money. And we wish you good luck in coming up with other legitimate uses of the money between now and the end of December, I guess, right? That
Yeah.
last month.
Yeah. No, it hasn't been hard to come up with them. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about technology? I know, running these Zoom meetings because of the limitations of cameras and speakers and so forth is, we've been doing pretty good at that, but it's not easy. And
We could certainly utilize that for improved technology for communication purposes during COVID. Absolutely. If we need to utilize them for more Chromebooks, for instance, we'll have a conversation later on tonight about remote learning and snow days, or even if we had everything in place for today with RMS. That situation, our issue is we don't send our Chromebooks home on a daily basis with our elementary kids, and so we have to plan for those types of remote experiences with them. We can at least dabble with the conversation about, do we purchase more so that there's duplication at home and that for those who need it anyway, and at school. It's a balancing act. So those are some other costs that we could think about.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for the superintendent? Okay, consent agenda. I have a question. Observation. So we have 3 coaching nominations. And under acknowledgement of receipt, we have stipend list.
Mm-hmm.
But when you click on that, you get to coaching nominations, and there are 4 listed.
Mm-hmm.
One is
So before is
Sheila Nagel
mm-hmm.
for JRMS girls basketball coach. Should that be added to the consent agenda as a coaching nomination?
No, originally we were looking at that, and so that's a mistake on the green sheet form.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I would suggest that we strike the stipend list from our consent agenda,
Mm-hmm.
because there is no stipend list there.
And I have an addition to the consent agenda. In the area of retirements, we have a retirement of Patricia Garrett McCarthy, who is retiring as of June 30th, 2021.
After how many years of service?
25 years.
After 25 awesome years of service. Thank you, John.
She will be missed.
Yeah.
It's an understatement.
Okay, any other comments around the consent agenda? Can I have a motion to approve the revised consent agenda? Heidi, you raised your hand.
To revise the consent agenda.
Thank you, Heidi, for that motion.
Second.
Thank you, John, for the second. Okay, so all those in favor of approving the revised consent agenda? I'm going to do a roll call vote because one of our members is attending remotely. Heidi says aye. Alicia?
Yes.
Says aye. Marcia?
Aye.
Thank you. Charlie? Says aye. John?
Aye.
And I say aye. Motion passes 6-0-0. Thank you very much. And now we're on to a presentation about Winter Co-Curriculars. I think that's by Mr. Springfield.
Yes. Yeah, I want to thank David for carving out some time tonight to be able to come and present. Tonight's goal unless we want to make decisions tonight, is really to start the conversation and to be able to make some decisions no later than the next time we meet. And then talking with other superintendents in the area, we're all in kind of different places, but we're trying to make the right decisions over in the scenic here Conval, Monadnock, Keene, that area. That seems to be our cohort that we've been working with. But thank you. I'll turn it right over to David.
So first, we had a very successful fall season. You know, I think a lot of people were worried about how it was going to work. I thought we, together, Heather and I made a really good plan, put it in place with our coaches. It wasn't flawless. There were issues that we had to deal with that weren't perfect. We all know that. But at the end of the day, the kids were able to participate in a number of different sports and activities. I mean, just in the sports for the middle school and the high school, there were well over 200 kids that were participating in some type of athletics. And that doesn't count the students that were involved, like in the chess club or Dungeons and Dragons, or things that were going on after school, where there were a lot doing that. So our goal when we set out was, these kids have been stagnant for a long time. Let's make sure, let's do our best to give them something to do, where they get their mind off things and get active. And we were successful. So now with the winter season, what I do is I first have to get what the NHIAA, basically the state, is going to tell us what their parameters are, what their guidelines are for sports. And so the NHIAA basically sent out something that said, and it's up there. I don't know if we want to
Scroll down a
I'm
little.
going to scroll down a little, Nick. But basically, in a nutshell, it just pushed the dates back, and they agreed to do all the sports in the winter to the best of their ability, giving the schools and the districts final say about how they really wanted to do it. So they're saying, we agree that the kids should play, should compete, and now what we do is we look at their framework, and then we put their framework into our district to try to make it even safer for our kids, and that's basically what we did. And if you look at the dates, usually the November 30th date there is when coaches, they advise, we start working with kids with drills, skills and drills. Usually November 30th, or even earlier than that, is when winter sports start. So they push it off to December 14th, and the first day to compete would be, I think it's January 11th there. So they've come up with their idea of how to do it, and I think they did a good job with it, and then they obviously turned it over to us now. And how can we make it work in our district to make it safe and clean, to keep like Ruben said, the cases are up a little bit, so we don't want to let down our guard at all. We want to make sure we stay strong, to make it happen. So if you go to the next slide, please, Nick, thanks. No, it's not that great. So what we need for that to happen, because obviously winter sports are inside, and right now the facility, all the schools close at 4:30. So right now, nothing happens for the most part after 4:30, just to help the custodians. So, because everyone's overwhelmed with all the cleaning and, this and that. So we just said 4:30 was obviously worked in the fall, but it really won't work in the winter because everything's inside, and we have a number of teams, from cheerleading to basketball teams to indoor track. So I guess what we're asking, Heather and I are asking, that the gym, all the gyms, RMS, JGS, and Pratt, are open till 8 o'clock. Now, we came up with 8 because most of the athletic directors that I deal with, we are going to all start our games earlier. So where a JV game might start at 5:30 and then there'll be a varsity game at 7, that's not going to happen this year. We're going to try to start much earlier. How much earlier, I have no idea. It could be a 4 o'clock JV game and a 5:30, so we're out of there by 7:30. I talked to John LeClaire, and he was perfectly fine with the Pratt being the last thing to be cleaned. They're there till 10. So the Pratt would just be the last place in the school, and all custodians would have to know that would be the last place that would be cleaned. John, we also told John and my coaches are willing to help. So for instance, they'll have spray, they'll have wipes. So they wipe down, spray down any place that their team, if say one team comes in at 3:30, they practice when they're done, they make sure they wipe down the balls, spray down their entire area, wipe down the doorknobs, anything they touched, then they exit the building and then another team would come in. Obviously masks, just like school. And that's the way it would work continually with different, basically there are four slots. You have activities that are gonna run after school. Activities are gonna run right after school till about 3:15, every 4 days a week. And then right after that would be your first slot for basketball, then that would be say 3:30 to 5, and then your second slot would be 5 to 6:30, and your last slot would be 6:30 to 8. So there's basically 3 slots in each school. We have about 10 basketball teams total, along with our developmental team, unified team, everything that we're doing. Plus you have the cheer teams, the indoor track team, and I'll get to the weight room and the cafeteria next. But in order for basketball to run efficiently and we feel it can run safely, the biggest thing would be the school now is open till 8 in the gymnasiums and the locker rooms, with the idea that the coaches and the players will help clean to make it so when the custodians have to come in, they're basically cleaning the bathrooms and and the locker rooms. But we would do the rest and do the best we could there. The cafeteria would need to be open till 6 because our cheer coach, who works in Massachusetts, can't get here. The earliest she can get here is 4:30. So she agreed, and that was pushing it to do her cheer 4:30 to 6. They use the exercise room with the mats in there. So that would shut down after they were done. That could be cleaned. The weight room, we're also asking to be, we're not sure, 6 or 8, depending on how many teams want to use it. And then the Jeffrey Grade School says 6 p.m. That we would like it open a little later, but we'll take whatever we can get for winter sports to make it work. So really the big difference is everything, the schools would have to stay open later, especially, but not just the schools, the gymnasiums and the locker rooms. And we would help the custodians make it happen. You could go to the next slide.
Before you leave, you want to talk about the additional hours on RMS?
Okay. Additional hours, was that on the weekends or is that? Okay, so a lot of our coaches, they have practices on the weekends. And so there's a cleaning service that comes in from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. that cleans on Saturdays. They come in, I think that's what we hired. I was talking to John LeClaire, that's the time. I talked to John LeClaire and he said it would be perfectly fine if we were out of there, by 4 o'clock. So that would allow the cleaning company, again, just like the custodians, they do everything else and then they focus on just the gym area at the very end to just make it so it's completely clean after that. But so that's kind of the additional.
So in a follow-up, could you just give us what those hours are?
They're variety. The hours on the weekends, yeah, variety. The cleaning is 10 to 6, so we would have to just make sure most of it. The rec department usually takes a bulk of Saturday.
Wait, but are we allowing?
And we're not allowing that this year. So the rec department usually would take their open basketball from, say, 10 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon. Since the rec department, from what I've heard, we're not letting outside groups in. I'm fine if that changes, but that's what I heard. We would be taking a lot of those slots. So for instance, a girls basketball team might come in from 8 to 10. Then a boys JV team from 10 to 12.
So you said Pratt Fitness Center open till 8. Additional hours during the weekend. So can we say on the weekend they're going to be open until 4 or 8 to 4?
Yes. Yeah,
that's what I'm interested in.
No, okay. Yeah, we can come up with, absolutely, because we were just going to be out of there at 4 o'clock. We weren't going to use any of the gym after 4. So if we're fine with that.
Who's the time is open?
Well, currently those individuals who have the fobs to go in and so forth are securing buildings.
But we have an outside cleaning service.
Yeah, they fob in. I think they have the codes to be able to alarm buildings.
Yeah, I know the coaches do, and then they must have, they must
And the
have, unless
coaches
John
don't.
lets them in.
Yeah.
Do you have,
Lou and John are working with people.
do you have maximum occupancy guidelines for each space?
You talking about games? Or what we do for practices is like we look at the phys ed classes, look at a lot of the clubs, and we feel like 20, it would be the maximum for a team to be in the gym. But that would only be during games. During practices, it's only going to be about 10 to 12 in the gym plus coaches. So, but during a game, you would have two teams. You would have actually 4 teams in there. But we have a really good plan for that. With when games happen, where you would only have the home team having 2 basically relatives or parents or 2 tickets. And we Heather and I went through the gym and spaced it out, and it would work perfectly with enough space where that's all that would be there for the games. You'd have the team coming in would sit in one bleacher area, and that's it. No one else could sit there. The team waiting to play would have masks on. Once the team is on the floor warming up, they won't have their masks. They play the game, and then the varsity teams would go in, and then the JV teams would sit behind. So that there would only be, and then no away fans. So there'd be no one from the other school coming besides coaches. That would be it, just coaches. And that way, if we look at our smaller gym, Heather and I spaced it out, and there was plenty of room if you go 2 seats, 6 feet, 2 seats, 6 feet, for almost all the kids, boys and girls, to be in the gym, to have their parents watch, or friends, just two per. So that would be it.
And so you're gonna have a ticket taker?
Yep. We always have a ticket taker, and they'll have a roster, and under the roster, we'd have 2 spots, and so if someone comes up, and we'd have someone take their temperature, so it's similar to going to the dentist. You come up, I'm here for, Dave Springfield, and they look Dave Springfield, there's 2 spots there. Put the name down, take the temperature of the person, just like when you go to the dentist, ask them the questions, have you been feeling, and then pass that, then they come in. Once those 2 spots are full, they're done, and then you just move on. And that way, everyone that comes in is temperature checked, they're asked the questions, to make sure they don't have any symptoms, and then there we go. And it just,
And they would be wearing masks the entire time?
yes.
Yeah.
So the fans are wearing masks the entire time. So the fans are 6 feet apart, they're wearing masks. Plenty of space. The opposing teams are wearing masks as well that aren't playing, that are behind the bleachers. But it's just, I think it's so important just to keep them together and not let, especially without, a mask. So, I mean,
So everyone's sitting on a bleacher, whether they're a team member or a member of administration or a coach or a spectator, is wearing masks.
yes, besides the players, besides when the game is going on, besides the players on the court aren't wearing masks, but everyone else would be masked.
How does that follow guidelines in abandoning the basketball?
Well, it's, I mean, you could compare it, I know it's an indoor sport, but, you're with that.
You have 2 people in close proximity.
Right, there are close proximity, but there are a lot of studies that show that playing the sport isn't what basically will get you COVID. It's that talking to someone for 15 minutes. When you're constantly moving and playing, you're not really, and you're really, you're not really at risk as much as if you're just sitting there talking with someone. And every team is checked. It's not like we just let everyone come in, like our players. Every day they come, they have to do the school one. And then, if they're going on an away trip, they get their temperature taken again. They get checked for symptoms. So it's not like we're just letting anyone just hop on a bus. and we make the other teams do the same when they come to play us. So we're all really working under the same protocol to help each other. So this worked, and it worked really well in the fall. And I do think, although with the winter, sometimes things change, can change a little bit. I do think it can work. Our area is still green, and we're only playing local teams. We're not traveling to Manchester. We're playing Keene and Monadnock and Messinic and the local teams.
So we're staying in.
We're staying in our region, yes. Besides, if we had a playoff game, like our boys team had to go to Trinity to play. But the bulk of our games are all within our basic geographic area. Within Hillsborough would probably be your farthest trip.
So we're not staying in county.
Yeah, but we could. I mean, if that's something that we wanted, it's really up to the district. The NHIJC says we're playing. It's up to the district, the school boards, and everyone involved to come up with a plan that they are comfortable with, that they think will work and be the safest plan.
And places like Conval and Messina aren't in Cheshire County either. I mean, so.
Right, but it's in a 20-mile radius, basically, or not 20 miles. As close as we can get, where we have enough teams to play. So that's the basic plan. I know that there was a lot of AAU basketball going on in the summer, where they did the temperature checks, they did the symptoms, they had 2 for each person, and it went pretty well. Unlike hockey, where there was a lot of issues with hockey. So I'm optimistic. I think it's just really important that we give the kids a chance to be active again. If you want to talk about a long winter with kids doing nothing, sitting at home, I think that would be rough. And the kids were really excited to be active in the fall, and I think they're just as excited to be active in the winter, even more so with how our winters are. So we feel like we have a good control of it, and obviously the state does too. The state, they follow all CDC guidelines, and they're saying that they feel like it's safe in New Hampshire to give it a shot, with no guarantees, obviously, but we do the best we can with safety and everything else. So,
Dave, just a question about the fans. I know you know that we were critical of the fact that our fans could not go to certain locations for these outdoor sports, and yet those fans were welcome to come to us, and that just didn't make any logical sense. So we're not allowing, I think it makes sense for safety reasons to not allow more people indoors for these sports. So I think that is good. I would like to see that is something that all districts are courteous to one another about that piece, and that happens consistently throughout the districts. And I don't know what those conversations are with other athletic directors, but we might be in the same situation, and we don't need to get ahead of ourselves for spring, but I'm just bringing it up. What happens in the spring when we're outdoors again? And I just think there should be consistency.
You're right.
It doesn't make sense.
You're absolutely right. Those were things that weren't discussed early on. When we started this, everyone at first, all the athletic directors were saying, we don't even know if this is going to work. And then our school board was pretty good about getting back to say, we want to play, but Keene's took forever, Monadnock's took forever, so we couldn't really come up with, at the end of the day, I don't know if that was an oversight with us, but I understand it caused, we just felt like it was safe. We had a big place. We felt like it was safe for the fans to come and space themselves out, and for some reason the other districts didn't. And this time, we're gonna have to be, because we're new, it was COVID, it was all new, we were just happy to get teams to play. And then some athletic directors, a couple times I didn't even know that fans weren't allowed at their games. So the communication was poor, but I think everyone was just excited to play. And then all of a sudden this happened, and then there was some it was unfair. It was unfair. It was unfair. Fans could show up and watch one game, but as an athletic director, I just kept my focus on the kids playing. If the kids are playing, that's the most important thing to me. We won't make this mistake again. And it also happened with the masks. Some teams no teams in our cohort wore masks, but teams in other cohorts wore masks. And then the playoffs happened, and one team wouldn't play another team that didn't have masks.
You're saying they were wearing masks on the field?
On the field. So then there was arguments there. Some teams forfeited. It became athletic directors. It was getting contentious with athletic directors because teams had to forfeit. Because if Conant wears masks, or let me give you an example, Hopkinton in their cohort, they wear masks. Now, when I say wear masks, take this with a grain of salt. They say they wear masks, but when the game starts, they look like me. When the ball gets rolling, they look like this, and then when it really gets rolling, they look like this. So they want to say they were masks on the field, but I went to the games. They were all over the place. But if Hopkinton was going to come to us, we didn't wear masks. He was asking our team to wear masks because their school board, they can only compete with masks. And I basically told him, we don't wear them. I think it would be unfair to ask our team to wear them at the spur of the moment. I'm sorry, his school board agreed to send their team with masks to play us. Other schools said, we're not going, we're forfeiting. So masks were a problem. And I think it's even going to be more of a problem in basketball, and that's something that we're going to have to work out because there are some athletic directors that want the kids to wear masks when they play in the game. And so I can see the fans, we're going to have to definitely work that out because it has to be fair, and I agree with you 100% there. It was too late, you know, and I didn't really want to be the bad guy to say, well, if you're not going to let my fans there, then none of your fans can come here when we already agreed that we would allow fans. I just didn't feel like going there. I could have been wrong, but I just felt, that way. But in basketball, we've had some issues too with, are we going to wear masks when we play? Kids won't play if they have to wear masks. I mean, we have kids that don't come to school because they have to wear a mask. I don't know. If I felt that masks playing a basketball game were the safest, I would have our kids wear masks. I don't feel, from what I've studied, that kids running around and all over the place are going to transmit it. And the safety protocols are there too. Yes, Chuck?
Are you going to go into the protocols for if one team member tests positive?
So basically that's in our handbook about what happens there. If you look at the athletics handbook, that it basically gets referred to the nurse. So when someone tests positive, the nurse kind of takes over, and the nurse has their protocols where what they do. That didn't happen with anyone. No one tested positive, but they were around someone who tested positive, like at work or something like that. And like at work, the state took over, so we had no choice. The state mandated what needed to happen. And then if it were to happen here, that would go to the health professionals, and they would basically take it over from there, whether it be contact tracing or how many days out or, getting tested.
So we're treating it as if they were a student in school.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
So,
yes, exactly.
So if a student who contact tracing, who have them not only their cohort in school, but also all their athletic teams.
Yeah, you'd have to
If they were a positive
include everybody.
test. If they're a positive test, yes, then all that takes place, the contract, contact
And
tracing.
if, like what you said, if a member on a team is in contact with someone through the week, for instance, who, even from another school or another town, which seems to be the case for us, that individual then has to quarantine 14 days, no ifs, ands, or buts. Doesn't matter if they get a negative test or not, they gotta go through that process. And so they won't be in the area.
So if our team plays another team and someone on the other team gets positive, that's positive, I guess, COVID, and our entire team who's been exposed to that person would also have to quarantine?
Well, it would depend on the contact. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't answer that one exactly because if they've been if they're on the court with the person and they're playing against them and so forth.
Yeah, no matter.
Yeah, 10 minutes they're looking at 10 minutes of close contact, and they used to be 10 minutes all at once. It's 10 minutes in accumulation. Now that's the definition. And so I would think that if they're starters on a team, if you're playing against starters on another team, there's a likelihood they're all quarantining.
Yeah, it could happen.
Because no one's keeping track of when Jersey 5 is on the court and Jersey 12 of the other
Yeah,
team is
that's
on the
right.
court at the same time.
Well, you have videotape, so you could go back and watch the videotape if you had to.
You could, but some individuals who are on the bench, for instance, and not in the game as much or whatever might not have to if you get down to the definition of it all.
And there's a good chance that will happen.
Another question, given the constraints for spacing on buses, are we gonna need more buses?
No more buses. The buses accommodated our soccer teams, no problem, and 20, basically there were 20, they told me 24 would be the maximum, which what we would abide by. We just don't go over that. We just, if we someone has to stay behind, or, we pick teams that only have that odd number this year, that's just the way it is. We rotate players sometimes. If you're a reserve player, you might play one game reserve, but the bus company doesn't, that's it, 24, and we wouldn't need any more buses.
We don't have a no-cut policy for JV?
There's a no-cut policy for everything right now. But
How are you limiting the numbers on a team?
so you have reserves, so what you do is, if you have that problem, we haven't had that problem, and I don't foresee it, but if we did, you'd have reserve players. So you would have a team, say with 15 players, and some of those players would be what they call practice or reserve players that rotate only for home games because we don't have to travel. But for away games, only the core players that were picked for that team would go. But for the home games, everyone would be there. It's just the way it has to be with COVID right now. Usually everyone would travel, but with bus situation, and
With our bus situation, we couldn't accommodate that?
Our buses, well,
I mean,
you could,
given that we're not busing on Wednesdays?
we're not going to have a problem with buses, I
No.
believe, for these teams are smaller than our fall teams typically, and they'll be able to go on. You wouldn't typically take multiple teams on the same bus.
yeah, so you would do every JV and varsity. So
But even JV and varsity, you might have 24.
Yeah, so usually-
in a basketball situation.
usually it's around 20 to 24 that you have
Yeah,
of players that you would have on both teams combined, and then you take the coaches. So it's right there. It's a very workable
and
scenario.
we're also talking still not as much travel, not just the distance, but if it's similar to what you guys did in the fall, I don't think you travel as much as you typically do anyway. And sometimes you play on Saturdays, is that correct?
Yeah, but it wouldn't be a problem. Now that I see it, because parents can drive their kids, so it really wouldn't be an issue. What happened with soccer was there were so many kids that we had to have reserve players because there wasn't enough room. They didn't have JV teams this year for soccer, so we kept a lot of kids that, we didn't cut. And they became a practice to keep their skills up and work. And they rotated. For basketball, that wouldn't happen because if you could only fit 24 on a bus and you had 28, we'd figure out a way with parents to get that kid to the game. Their parents would take them to the game and take them home from the game. So they wouldn't miss out in that. Now that I just thought about it, they wouldn't miss out.
But that does bring up whether they're allowed listeners.
Yeah, to go to their
They don't sit there.
Yeah, well, they would have to sit in your car. Yeah, I know.
Well, that brings up live streaming, right? So,
Yeah.
But you're only going to Manhattan, and you're only going to
yeah.
Keene and Messina. You're not traveling to Sanborn and sitting in your car. I mean, I think it would make it easier. I think with COVID now and all the restrictions and all the, it's really been it's been wild out there athletically, and we're all really happy with the fall. We think we've worked out some kinks, the fan situation, the masks. But in the end, the NHI doesn't delegate, the NHI does not, we wish they did, but the NHI just gives the basic parameters and then they tell the districts to figure it out on their own. And that's what happened. Some school boards said no fans at all. Some school, and some said yes, and I don't fault either one. And it just created a problem, without a doubt. So, yes, John.
Dave, what do you think happened with hockey? Why was that more of a spreading of, situation?
That's a good question, because I know where my son is right now. He's doing a post-grad year at Winter, and they shut down the hockey rink there, and that's a hockey school.
Yeah.
I don't know if they just ignored, if it has to do with the temperature. I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't really have a good answer for the hockey situation.
Man-to-man and closed environment.
Well, the reason I'm asking is obviously that because the difference with the winter sports is that you'll be inside. So.
Yeah, I just, and I agree, but I do think that there's pros and cons to it, but I do think to think of the alternative of having these kids that have been idle for so long and then they finally get excited mentally, physically they play in the fall to go back into their cave if we weren't going to have it, it would be really tough. I think it's worth it to put in the safety parameters and do the best we can and just understand it could shut down at any time, depending on what happens. Yes, Ruben.
Couple questions. One, I think I know the answer to a little bit. It's all out. I'll ask that one first. Live streaming. I know we were looking to do that at one point in time. Is that something we're still continuing to do?
We are. It's getting in
look at an
3
opportunity to see if we can get some live streaming that would.
Could that fall under the COVID money?
COVID, yep, I think so.
Yeah, because we do have a lot of people for years that are elderly or just love to come to the games that wouldn't be able to come to the games.
Or in this case, the majority of people.
Yeah, if we streamed it, it would be pretty cool that they could watch it as well. So that's an option.
The second question is, have you, and it's early on in the conversations, I know, because I've been getting emails from other superintendents, and no one has answers, and I know that Conval has kind of a plan for how they're dealing with their athletes and relative to school and so forth. That's a little different. But have you had a lot of conversation about the concept of athletes wearing masks on the court while playing with the surrounding groups?
We have. We have, and there are some athletic directors, not in our cohort, not in our area, that want to do it, but in others that have a higher percentage in their area that want to do it. Again, I'll go back to my son who's at Winter right now, and they have to wear masks when they play basketball. And between the mask becoming soaking wet immediately within like 10 minutes, and then playing with it, falling down, someone hitting, it, and then some kids that, to enforce it, to say, well, get it over your nose, get it over your mouth. I wonder how safe it really is when it's just something that's all over the place, soaking wet, falling down, touching it, grabbing it, pulling it. And to breathe like that, playing a sport like basketball would be extremely difficult. And, I feel like in our area that a lot of kids wouldn't play if they had to wear masks playing on the court. Now that doesn't mean anything because it's safe. We got to be safe no matter what. We feel like that's the safest thing, but just knowing that some kids didn't come to school because they had to wear a mask during school. Now you're going to ask them to wear it as they're running wind sprints up and down the court, and it's soaking wet, and they're playing with it, grabbing it, pulling it down, getting yelled at, the coaches are, pull it up, pull it down. I just think it would be more of a hassle and not as safe as we think it would be if it were worn perfectly all the time on the court. But you'll have some people that will adamantly disagree with me as well. But all I know is in professional sports, they're showing that it's not transferred during competition. That they can't, the experts haven't seen, they can't trace anything where it's actually happened within the competition. It's happened at going out to dinner, like Gilmore having dinner with Cam Newton, and so they're saying that because they're moving so much during that game, that it's not standing there talking to someone for 10 minutes. It's constant moving. So again, I have my opinions, and I try to base them on as many facts as I can, but I think there's a lot of experts out there who still grasping at straws trying to figure out how it really works. So
some things to think about. In our reopening framework, it talks about, specifically in the athletics section, that we would basically deal with fall and then come back to talk about how we would go about doing things, after evaluating the fall, going forward. And so there are some different, I think it's on page 40, 41 of the framework. So the changes that we're talking about right now, and we're not, what I'm hearing is we're not necessarily saying, here's what we're asking for by the changes, but right now, what we're talking about is just, changes would be like the time, so changing, this would be the time that we would need buildings, not maybe the entire building, but specific areas of the building to be open for athletics. And another change would be perhaps some more specificity with who attends the game and kind of the operations of what's happening inside the gymnasium as well. So some very specific language around that.
And maybe, you implied some numbers for who's, numbers that are going to be in the space for different parts of the activity. That would be helpful. I have a question about your schedule. You said that something like activities will happen after school until
3:15. 2:15 to 3.
I have a club that runs till 4.
Yeah.
You need all that time. But anyway, does that mean that athletics aren't happening till after that?
Yeah,
So that I can really maybe perhaps lure some folks who have shown interest in my club, but so that they're athletes that maybe now they don't have capacity?
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be done at 3:15, so if there's other things that they would like to do, they can, we're going to have a late bus, I think. Hopefully at 3:45, so I don't know, that's a whole nother, that might not help you because yours goes till 4.
Well, I mean, if you want to have to get a bus, they go to the bus. But
Yeah.
no, I'm talking about the conflict. In the fall, the conflict was athletics versus club.
So Laurel, you're asking if someone's in your club until 4, but they're also an athlete and practice would start early, that they
But
would,
they would just leave.
is that what you're saying?
Right, they would just leave, but there would no longer, it sounds like there's not going to be athletics immediately after school. Right?
Right, what we've decided to do is run an activity right after school to help with because a lot of times you have that downtime, say 2:10 to 2:30, where kids are all over the place. They're waiting for the weight room to open at 2:30. Their clubs don't start till 2:30, and it's kind of like babysitting. So we decided, and there's a safety issue, so we decided if we started the clubs right at 2:15 after school to 3:15, the kids would basically get out of school, go right into their club. And especially in the gym, we're going to have a lot of activity 4 days a week for clubs. At 3:15, they're there for an hour. At 3:15, it ends. We clean up, and then the school basketball team would come in at 3:30 and start right there.
Okay, so what you're saying is that, I see, so like, for instance, clubs, non-competition teams, there could be like
Floor hockey. Heather,
or
international sports. And Heather's
okay, got it. During that time frame.
One day is international sports, another one's just going to be open basketball for kids who just like to come and play for fun for the middle school. And so we want to, and then you have the weight room as well. So we want to incorporate more with the kids who don't play that.
But I think we also have
we
have the academic wellness center open during that time frame for everyone, but also for athletes, so that if they stay after, they can go do their work.
Exactly, they could go there
Too.
and then go to their practice at 3:30
Yeah.
and have a place for them. And there's nothing wrong with athletes joining the activities, which we
No,
we want them
there's
to, we want them to
everything right
become a
with it,
well-rounded, and then go to their sport after that. So, so that's how the gyms will work. Ringe wouldn't work that way. Ringe would just have their normal 3 slots, 3:30 to 5, 5:30, 5 to 6:30, and 6:30 to 8. Ringe would just, have their normal 3 slots. But here, we would do the activities right after school at 2:15.
And Dave, you said when you're doing those slots, you're getting that one group out before the other group
Yes.
comes in, so you're gonna lose some time.
We're hoping you only lose about 5 minutes. If everyone has a job, it shouldn't take long. You have your coaches, your managers, your players. Basically you wipe down your area, wipe down the balls, wipe down the doorknobs any doorknobs you use. Everyone uses hand sanitizer. There's hand sanitizer on both sides, and then they exit. And then the other group masks. Everyone has masks when they enter and exit. Then they would come in and go through the same routine. So you're right. There will be. Hopefully, we'll get pretty good at it, but you will have that time.
And in the weight room, when students are working out, are we requiring masks to be worn there?
So again, it comes down to how many people are in the weight room, and 2, if they're in an area where they're not even close to anyone, say they're in a cage doing a lift and everyone else is over on the other side, we don't mandate that they have a mask until they're 6 feet or closer to other people. But there's if we want to say that you have to have a mask to work out, we're all right with that. We're just trying to follow CDC protocols in terms of 6 feet, what we think is safe, number 1.
That we want masks in school.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
And most of the kids have them on in there. The kid's by himself doing something, a squat or something over in the corner, and there's no one around. We don't usually enforce that. There's no one there. So, and again, they clean down the area. So when someone's done lifting in an area, they have to get the spray bottle. They have to get sanitize their hands. They wipe down the bar. They wipe down anything that they use. They wipe down before they leave that area. And then, so if someone else comes, it's clean, like you would do in any gym that you would go to. So it does get scary. I'll be the first one to admit it does get scarier, a little scarier in the winter when we know we're enclosed. The great thing about this school is our filtration system, I think, is top notch. So I think the way it filters the air, I think that is helpful as well. We're in a low area right now, and
We do have the I-Waves block, working the entire time in the weight room and all the.
in the gym and that, yeah, it's working, and we're very diligent. We test in terms of like the temperatures, and the kids are supposed to do it before school. There's only so much you can do, and I guess you just have to weigh the pros and the cons and think about the kids and the safety of everyone else. It's just not about the kids, I get it. It's about the safety of everyone else. I definitely understand that.
Have any coaches that you've talked to or athletic directors mentioned the possibility of having their athletes or our athletes tested multiple times a week? I know that in colleges or in pro sports and so forth, obviously that would happen, and I know that that's part of the issue.
Which I still can't figure out how that can happen.
Right. I don't know if it can happen.
I know it happens.
But I don't know if anyone's brought up any of that, or if even.
No one is, because testing can be financial, and no one's really brought up testing. Testing was only brought up if someone were in contact and they wanted to get tested, like the nurses. If someone's in contact here with someone who's had it, the nurses, after 5 days, they have to get tested. So here I'm pretty sure it's 5 days. After 5 days, you can go get a test. If your test comes back negative, then you're allowed, and you'd have to double check with the nurses, but I've worked with them with sports. If you don't want to get tested, you have to wait the whole quarantine. You have to do the whole 10 or 14 days, whatever it is, before coming back. But I'm pretty sure after 5, but you have to check with Wendy and Andrea on that. What happened was a kid gets the sniffles. It happened to the Jacob Traum SAT. He gets the sniffles taking the SATs and sneezes, and they send him to the nurse. And then the nurse
So the student, yeah, so basically the student,
basically makes him get tested before he comes back.
right, so
Not
student.
that he was around anyone that had it.
So the protocols are if someone, goes to the nurse, has symptoms, they get sent home, there's a specific amount of time, they need to get tested. If the test comes back, they're able to come back into the system. If they are known to have been in close contact with a positive case, that there's a no test out of that. You are quarantined for 14 days. Yeah.
Right. So that's basically it.
Dave,
Yes.
what are the dates of the winter sports season?
Okay, so November 30th is when we can start working with our kids unofficially. So you still follow the same protocols, but the NHI encourages you to start getting them in shape, start having open gyms and things like that. And then December 14th is the first official day of practice. So officially it's December 14th, November 30th is when they encourage you. We always,
And the end of the season is?
the first games are until January 11th. So they want to have the game, they want to have that because of Christmas and New Year's and all that. They want to put out the games later in January to make sure it's safer. And then they're not sure about the end of the season right now. They're going to kind of wait and see. So
Okay.
everything's kind of pushed back at least a couple weeks, with everything. And there's no Christmas tournaments and things like that. It's basically as cookie cutter and safe as we can, in these conditions, possibly get it, so.
Any other questions for David? Any other questions for David?
No, thank you.
No,
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This is the hardest part of the day, right?
No, I got 3 parents now. It can get pretty hard. But I get worried about when kids, if they can't do anything during the winter, how hard that will be, morale-wise, for them. We do our best. Thank you.
Is that your jacket?
Oh, I got 2 jackets.
Thank you.
So did we have an opportunity, we asked David a lot of questions, but is there anything we want to see in the plan before we act on it in 2 weeks?
Yeah, well, certainly we discussed what we, more detailed of what the fan structure would look like, what the protocols for when learners enter the gymnasium, when they exit, what's happening on court, cleaning, and so forth, and then the times of day and everything. So it sounds like it needs to be all fairly spelled out.
And I was thinking about Jeffrey Grade School. What is that gymnasium used for? That floor is in pretty rough shape.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question as to why that specific location would be used for basketball, unless it was just for maybe some, I don't know.
It'd be like a practice space
Maybe
area.
just a practice, yeah, just a practice space. I know, I that we use this location over here for the volleyball. And we don't use it there, so I'd have to find out more. Maybe we get more information about what the spaces are used for.
I'm sure there will be a schedule.
David may have said it, but just on any, when fans come and, they're going to have a list of, the students and each student player gets two parents. We're recording the names of people who are coming so we can contact
I think we have to record the names. It's actually.
We have to do the same screening that we do when we come here, right?
Yeah, we have an MOU. Well, actually, that's something we need to officially say okay to. The JREA has affirmed the MOA, the memorandum of agreement that we put forward to them. Same thing with the JRSSA. It's basically the same language. There's a couple differences, but so tonight, maybe for some action, if we were to be able to formally say we agree to those agreements, that would be great. So specifically in both of those, it states that we will make certain that we are getting the names and asking questions and so forth of everyone who comes into
And
the
pre-screening.
facility. Yeah, yeah. So we have to do that anyway, and we do that currently. Now, whether they do it through a digital device or whether they do it through paper, we actually did specify in the agreement it would be a digital. I believe we said it would be a digital platform. Yeah. So we'll have to be consistent with all of these documents at the exact same time.
So, if I may, it sounds like something that's been very positive for our students in the fall. And we'd love to do it in the winter. Also sounds like Dave and Heather have worked on this substantially. But what can we do to make sure that they, that whatever arrangements we have, whether it's an MOU or our own policy for sports for the winter, that we have the best practices in place?
Well, I think we take the MOA, the information from there, make sure that anything put into this fall sports proposal doesn't contradict that, or at least includes whatever that language is. Probably the easiest just to cut and paste some items. I think from a school board perspective, the hot conversations really are across the state. Are people wearing masks while they play the game itself? So you have to, as a board, decide whether that's something you want to be stronger on, in that sense. So that's something to be thinking about over the next week or so. I think another thing is, do you want to even have any fans in the gymnasium, right? So you're bringing in other people into that setting, or do we just live stream everything and feel that that's adequate? Certainly, we did want fans there outside. We do think that's important for our kids to have, and for their families to be able to see these moments and to be able to experience them. I think that's important. But it's a different setting. And so those are things I think that you have to weigh. I think that it sounds very clear that we're not allowing other people from other places to come in. It sounds like everyone's on the same page there.
When I think of the NHIAA, I can kind of understand why they might not want to say, do it like this, right? Because they're not sure either. But there's still have to be best practices out there, people who've looked at, you're moving inside. What Dave says, for example, about there tending to not be transmission by athletes because of a quick contact or something, that's great. I haven't seen anything on that, but of course, it's not.
Yeah, we'll have to look to see some of those. I know that certainly if we're talking about professional sports and even in some collegiate, that's why I asked the testing question, because those teams don't even let their players play if they ever have a negative, a positive test. And so they're not getting on that.
And we have the luxury of the bubble and
the bubble with
Yes,
the basketball, exactly.
you know.
There are a lot of other factors
Right.
that we have to consider while we have people leaving school, going home, and so forth.
We've got a couple of months until this games actually start.
Yeah, we've got some time.
And a lot may change in terms of testing availability and stuff like that. What's not feasible now.
So this presentation was really basketball centric, I think. So how is the swim team? I mean, they're not practicing in our facility. They're
No.
traveling to the Y, right? What precautions are made in that facility for our students and
Yeah,
coach? And how are meets going to work?
meets are virtual evidently. That's why I did ask that. I believe the meets are going to be, you're going to be taking your time and someone else is going to be doing the same thing at, a time. And that's how they're going to be. You won't have teams.
Okay, well, so that would be interesting to have.
Yeah, so all that information
And,
about all sports.
do we have any students participating in skiing this year? I take it hockey's off the table, but
I don't know if hockey's off the table. Conval is playing their sports seasons. I don't know if they're playing all sports. That's what I haven't figured out.
okay. So do we have students going there for hockey
I do know that,
as Conan athletes?
well, and so,
So we need some. I think we need some more
yeah,
information.
sure.
Well, and I think cheerleading as well, that maybe they need to change. We know that's one of the things that you were
But we didn't
speaking
hear
about.
anything about cheerleaders being there for games tonight.
Yeah,
I mean, why are we?
I think I'd like more answered about that, and if that's going to take place, it seems like there should be different protocols from what is normal in terms of spacing things. So
Because in cheerleading, you're getting close to each
Making
other,
pyramids.
And
touching, throwing people up in the air and catching them and so forth.
I think more details on everything is
Okay.
really helpful. And also just, I know they meet with the coaches at the beginning of seasons, but, I guess I would just like to understand how they're getting all of these protocols communicated really clearly to all the coaches who maybe aren't, they're not
Mhm.
in our buildings or looking at our framework in such detail, but I feel like there needs to be a really strong effort to make sure that there's some stronger training for coaches, even if they're coaches who have been with us for a long time, to go through what the expectations are.
And so what I'm hearing is that these are all indoor athletic sports activities. And so it varies, it's very different than being outside, right? So wanting to have much more clarity on all these, and not all sports are equal is another piece, right? So cheerleading, you're usually cheering, you're shouting, things like that. So what is that?
So
What are
this
the
plan-
regulations around that?
Volleyball is not a man-to-man kind of a sport, more of a zone. It's not as worrisome.
That's different.
It sounds like this plan might need to encompass,
So we do have a volleyball club, and they did play some games.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess for me, I would like to see two things.
Mhm.
I'm interested in some evidence that can help inform a decision specific to the usage of masks for indoor sports. Maybe that was shared by the NHIA, their sources where they got that information. I don't know if that can be passed on to us. I think that would be helpful for me. And then also more details in this plan that hopefully are specific to all of the different sports that we're talking about and inclusive of all of them. So
Sure.
just reiterating that and asking for that evidence to help inform
Mhm.
our action.
Nick has a question, or has,
One question on answering a question. To Heidi's point about coaches, I do know, just because I helped with the document, that there was a document created that was shared at least with coaches that had a framework of all the different things that were specific to them in the fall. So I do know that that's something that took place. So instead of just saying we have a framework, go read it, it had very specific points on things that they needed to do and expectations. So I'm sure that that can be developed for winter and maybe be more specific to each sport. And then conceptually speaking, I know we're talking a lot about different sports and how they might be the factors might be different and that they're not necessarily equal because of various levels of contact. Would it be beneficial to, revamp our framework, or would it maybe be more beneficial for us to create a supplementary document that kind of lays some of this out so that it's, just there as, the winter sport guidebook or something like that?
Well, so that we have a co-curricular handbook now.
Yeah,
Right.
but it's not COVID specific, it's just our
Yeah,
typical activities and athletics handbook.
okay,
Maybe,
so,
maybe appendices.
yeah,
Yeah.
so I think that's a good point, Nick. That would probably be very helpful to have it
I'm
documented.
I have a meeting with Heather tomorrow morning on a couple other things, and I can just bring up some of these conceptual points to her to.
That makes me think of family ID when students sign up to play a sport or participate in an activity with those, would you need to make sure that you put, or whoever manages family ID, that those things show up on there, because we ask people to check off that they've read.
Yeah,
The handbook,
we could
but
make
we
specific
want that to
documents that
be-
would go on like family ID or something
Yeah.
like that, so that they could have it as a part of the process.
Anything else on co-curriculars? Okay, we have on our agenda a discussion around snow days. And I suspect this is about being super organized to make a snow day a remote day and not lose an educational day and have to tack it on the end.
That's exactly it. We've had a fair amount of conversation about this, at least the concept of it, the idea of it. We've never come to a formal conclusion that that's what we were going to do. And so we do, it's certainly, I would say, I can't say with authority that most schools are going in that direction. I would say almost all the schools that I've connected with, which are about 5 or 6 of them, certainly are moving in that direction.
Students and teachers love snow days.
Well, that's the
Coming back to
alternative, right? There are some people out there, and there are even articles written about that, like, don't take the last joy of childhood away
Yeah.
from doing that. On the flip side, we hear every year at the end, not every year, but many years at the end of the year, let our kids out early so they can be outside. Let them out early so they can be outside. So you're playing with both. If you can continue to have continue education as it's going on and not have snow days.
Well, and I think this year, in particular, our last day of school is scheduled a bit later than we normally would be. So do we want to bump that even later this year? I don't know. I value having kids get out early, and I also really value snow days because I do think they're a special thing when you live in this type of climate. But do we maybe just look at
Do we have,
this year and talk about what our new
sorry, do we have a certain number of days built in before we have to start making them up?
Well,
Yeah, we've got 5 built in, right?
built into the calendar, but that's just tacked on to the end. It's not really built in. No one ever has snow days built in to the day. Like, we don't say the last day is going to definitely be, let's say, I don't know, June 25th or something like that. And then we say, but if we don't have school, we come back to June 19th. That's not something we do. We say the last day is, say, June 19th, and then if we have snow days, we tack on the opposite direction. We go on from there. So we add.
All right, I didn't know, I was thinking we had a couple that were like kind of embedded so that we didn't have to start counting right away. And I was just gonna say, well, let's give a couple of snow days, but once it starts really adding up, then you go remote. That's all I was thinking. Trying to find the middle line there with the joy of snow days and
hours and not days. And so we do have a little bit of room for that type of movement. We do have that. So if we want to have a blend of those days, or just say, if it's icy out, although maybe that's not the way to go. I mean, if it's kind of, you're having a snow day due to kind of, ice and freezing rain and things of that nature, are kids playing on those days outside? Or if you have a blizzard, there may be a big difference between if you have, 1.5 feet of snow and you can go out and do that kind of playing outside and so forth. I will say, if it's icy, the chances of your internet service going is a lot higher. Yep.
I mean, is it feasible for staff, really, and specifically teachers, to be organized enough and, to be able to instantly switch to, okay, tomorrow's going to be remote?
So, right, I think that's tough to ask of them. I'm wondering if we
Well,
start with what we normally do. We have snow days. If we have a winter where we're seeing them pile up, then maybe we need to think about using any future snow days and asking our staff to be prepared to potentially do a remote day.
Are there things we can approve or institute that make it more feasible to, or?
Well, I mean, I do think, first of all, we do have a remote day every week.
But that's
so
different.
It
Like,
is.
so, for example, RMS was closed today.
Sure.
I have to go to the school tomorrow to pick up my children's materials for the remote day on Wednesday.
Yes.
And so as a parent, I wonder, how does that work when we get the lovely phone call from you at 5 a.m. that there's no snow?
You'd
there's
have
cold,
to
you know what I mean?
believe that there's a possibility of a remote day the
And
day
send
before and
everything
send
the day
everything the day
before.
before.
Okay.
That's what you'd have to do. That's what the blizzard bag approach was beforehand, was, before it was considered remote and technology and stuff like that. You would say, the forecast tomorrow is that we have snow. It's a possibility that there will be a blizzard bag day. So here are the materials you're taking home with you during that. That's what you would do for elementary.
And
For high school, middle school, they take their stuff home anyway. But
With that, when are teachers going to have time to, there's a whole host of questions, I think. Is that going to be?
well, if they
one
have
of the best
their
sources of learning?
courses on the Google Classroom already, then they would just proceed from there. What we could do with these questions, if we have some very specific questions about this, because we have some time, is to, we could poll, staff, first of all, what would you prefer? We can do that, but also what would you need in order to make that happen?
Yeah.
Because it's really, in this case, we would not have formal conversations about that to request. I think that there can be some, like I said, some surveying, some conversation, or we can just simply have the administrators have conversations with their faculty and say, how do we want to go about doing this? What would we need in order to do this? How should it, look on these days that are kind of sporadic? Obviously, if we are at a spot where we're already remote because of community transmission or whatever, you could just continue going on anyway because you'd already be doing it.
You
Right,
kind of have to
yeah.
do it then, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ruben, I think Marcia has been trying to say something, or Laurel, sorry.
So,
I think, Marcia,
Yeah, she went out for a little bit.
Okay, but I feel like
So-
she's.
So sorry, and this may have been said because you froze for a bit, then you were underwater, and then there was no sound. So, there were two things I was thinking. One was snow days tend to be predictable, and therefore you can say, hey, most likely take it with you, whatever you're going to want. The other thing I was going to say is all teachers are responsible for having an emergency set of sub plans. So that if something happens and the next day they can't come in and they can't get there to drop off plans, there are plans in the office in a file for them. And they could always have emergency remote plans a day as well. That's all.
Well, and when you're meeting face to face and we already have a remote learning handbook and a schedule basically that goes on, you simply have, you know, the learners say, these are the procedures on these days. You enter into your classroom, you take attendance, and a teacher, you know, can present for 30, 40 minutes or whatever it is. It's not like a 60-minute time frame, but there are those time frames already spelled out within the remote handbook.
You know, when you mentioned, well, you more than mentioned, you've talked for a couple of years now about getting teachers who work in the same subjects to actually meet together on a regular basis, talk about their curriculum, and, you know, develop sort of a unified plan and standards. This is sort of a new area. I know it's not quite the same, but it all sounds like it would fall within that kind of a need for discussion. I don't know if it's necessarily on a, you know, course by course or subject by subject level, but I know there is a weekly meeting, but I bet those meetings are already pretty full.
Well, but priorities can change, right? So you can, if this is something that the board says we want to have more of a plan presented to us of how we would utilize these days, or how, just to make sure that we would be successful.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think it would just be to better understand how you could ensure that it would be successful given the short amount of notice that every teacher would have.
I would appreciate seeing a plan that
Sure.
meets Laura's description.
Okay.
Still not sure.
Oh, sorry, jumping in again here.
I also,
Is there, can you hear me?
yes.
Okay. Is there, remember at the end of the year last year when we ended like in May, and then there was time to kind of debrief what were the lessons learned? Wasn't that part of the conversation then that administrators and teachers had around, you know, going forward, how might we utilize it with things like snow days? Wasn't that part of
We definitely do have surveys and information that came our way that said, yeah, a lot of teachers had said, we should be doing this, we should be doing this. Parents, some parents, I wouldn't say a huge number of parents, but some parents certainly said that they thought that was a good idea to move forward with that. Like I said, it is something that is being looked at all over the place and is commonly being done, or I know that, you know, I received a text message the other day from my son's school saying this is our blizzard. They actually used the word blizzard bag. This is our blizzard bag approach. You're going to sign on. The teacher's going to be there. This is what to expect. Boom. It was pretty cut and dry. It was the same thing that they did during remote learning the previous year. So that's, you know, so yeah, we've talked about it, but I think that to the point is to ensure that people have faith that the process is going to work, that it's going to be beneficial to kids, that it's going to be done in a way where our teachers are going to be able to be successful. I think that's what you're looking for. You're looking for a little more of that, because I also hear here with a couple of individuals, maybe all of you, that there's some value to those down days and those snow days, and that we all have experienced that as kids especially, that there is something different about those. For me, it was, I got to shovel a lot, so it wasn't fantastic, but you know.
Well, that is something, you said you have to shuffle.
Yeah, it's like,
Well, you have to do that eventually.
I like the concept.
Right.
I'm sorry, what?
So I like the concept that you originally started on, which was, the board would like to go to snow days.
Mhm.
And if they do it, they're definitely gonna screw it up. So tell us how we can do it and, do it in the best way possible.
Mhm.
And get get the input from our administrators and our teachers and come up with a way of making it happen.
I do think that most of our teaching staff does have a lot of materials on their Google Classrooms. Some have already started to use Otis as well, now that everything's been put into place there, and so that's being utilized especially for assessment purposes. So there's some dabbling there as
That
well.
would be a very interesting future aid report.
Oh, sure.
Otis implementation.
What was what?
Otis implementation.
Yeah, that would be a good future item. Yep. So I think I have,
Okay.
we have the notes. I got the marching orders. We'll be fine there. Thank you.
Okay. Committee updates. Shall we table them to the next meeting?
Yeah, I don't have any updates. We had to postpone our meeting.
Facilities doesn't.
Well, for the board goals,
Yeah.
school board goals, I just wanted to share with you what we did.
Okay.
Okay, and what we're proposing is that the overarching goal for the school year would be to work with the administrators on the development and approval of a 5-year district strategic plan by June. Okay. The plan would be collaboratively created with the full support of the board and administrators. It would include themes such as academic achievement, culture, safety, financial stability, communication, and facilities. Be comprehensive, have measurable objectives, timetable, and evidence of progress over the course of the year. If the board agrees to accept this goal, Ruben will convene a subgroup of board members and administration to develop overarching priorities and objectives, implementation strategies, and measurable evidence metrics and timetables. So that's something for people to think about between now and the next meeting.
And a plan for how to involve people where you would want to involve them.
Yes. Nice.
Thank you, John.
Yes, thank you. Okay. We do have a finance committee scheduled for November 12th. Okay, so now we're up to our second session of public comments. Any members of our public wish to make a comment? Please use the raise your hand feature.
We do have a chat.
We'd love to hear from you.
Well, while we're giving people a second, I can
Okay.
read one chat comment. This is from Erin Chamberlain of Jaffrey. She says, even if a snow day is remote, they never spend all day doing remote. Kids will still get time to go out and play or have downtime.
Thank you, Erin.
I'm not seeing anything.
Okay. Any board matters?
Just,
I'm sure that everyone in this room will go out and vote tomorrow, if they haven't voted already. I hope everyone in the audience will do the same.
just the other board matter would be just formally approving the MLAs of the associations, the agreements. The language I did check through, all the language is the same as we had.
Has it been signed?
The MOUs, we could approve the JRSSA, the JREA, we don't have, they haven't ratified it yet, have they?
The JRE is ratified. I was informed on Friday.
Well, the JRE was ratified, then somebody needs to move the acceptance. I'll make a motion that we accept the JRSSA MOU relative to the work impact of the framework,
And JRE?
separate motion to, okay.
Okay,
You want to do them both at once? or-
sure.
All right. JRSSA and JREA.
Thank you, Charlie, for the motion.
Second.
Thank you for the second, Alicia. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Marcia?
Aye.
Thank you. Alicia?
Yes.
Heidi? Aye. Charlie?
Aye.
John?
See,
I think that means yes, and I say yes, so that motion passes 6-0-0. Thank you, Charlie, and everyone else. Any other board matters?
I'd like to make a motion.
To adjourn. Thank you, John, and then we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.